Across the continent of Africa, political leadership continues to be dominated by senior citizens well past their 60 years of age, with several leaders holding on to power for decades, not caring much about democracy despite of the growing calls for general change. And despite of decades of progressive development, the continent's political landscape remains largely shaped by aging leaders whose grip on power continues to strengthen. Now, here are some of the African leaders that are well into their 80s and still are holding on to power. Bola Ahmed Tinubu is the current president of Nigeria and has been since 2023, who is now 74 years old. Now, I know most of you might believe that being 73 years old is young, but the reality of time states otherwise. You see, at 73, most senior citizens are retired and battling a series of ailments, while others have lost their physical strength and are slow grinding into a halt. Therefore, being president in your 70s may be legally accepted, but it's not ideal because the presidential job comes with a lot of challenges that do require physical, mental, and even emotional strength in order to perform. Ismail Omar Guelleh is the president of Djibouti since 1999 and is now 78 years old. At 78 years of age, I bet you that President Guelleh is not as sharp as he used to be. Additionally, he is of an older generation and therefore cannot relate as well with the new crop of leaders in Djibouti who do embrace new ideologies of the 21st century. But even after 27 years of being in power, Djibouti is still grappling with the same old age challenges they had since before independence. And yet, President Ismail Guelleh continues to hold on to power, disregarding democracy. Joseph Boakai is the president of Liberia, who has been president since 2023 and is presently 81 years old. At 81 years old, Joseph Boakai cannot pay enough attention to get the job done because he is old. At 81 years old, Joseph Boakai is allowed to bask under the morning sun while feeding his cows in his retirement home somewhere in his village. And yes, Joseph Boakai may be the smartest, most intelligent person to have been born in Liberia, but even he knows that the power of time does not care how smart you are. No one can outrun or outsmart time. So Liberians need to be serious about age when choosing their future leaders. Isaias Afwerki is the current president of Eritrea, who has been president since 1993 and is now 80 years old. President Afwerki has been the only president Eritrea has known. Also, President Afwerki runs a highly repressive single-party totalitarian dictatorship in Eritrea. This means that the country has never, and I mean never, held national elections and lacks a free press. At the age of 80, I can bet you that President Afwerki has not thought for 1 minute about retirement. In his mind, he will live on forever. That is until his body starts to shift left and bend. That is when he'll start thinking about grooming one of his sons to replace him, forgetting that Eritrea is an independent nation and not his property. Yoweri Kaguta Museveni is the president of Uganda and has been since 1986 after exiling one Idi Amin Dada way back when, since before we were born. President Museveni is now 81 years old but feels like he's 50 and believes that he is 40. He even asked his people to grant him one more term so that he can finish the projects he started back in 1986. And to prove that he's still up for the job 40 years later, President Museveni learned how to karate, jiu-jitsu, kung fu, and even tai chi, just to show us how youthful he still is. President Museveni also believes that his son is the rightful candidate for the seat of power after his term is done. To Museveni, his son is right for the job as president because he said so, and all Ugandans should just agree with him and follow suit because he knows what's best for Uganda. Alassane Ouattara is the current president of Ivory Coast since 2010 and is presently 84 years old. All I can say to President Ouattara is let democracy reign in Ivory Coast. I mean, Alassane Ouattara should just pack his bags and retire to Dimbokro, where he came from. The people of Ivory Coast are tired of bad leadership and want change. So just go and live out your sunset years in Dimbokro or Paris or wherever you want. Just go. Teodoro Obiang Nguema Mbasogo is the president of Equatorial Guinea and has been since 1982. At the age of 84, President Nguema has been president for 44 years, but still Equatorial Guinea is facing developmental obstacles under his leadership. I don't even blame President Nguema for being a self-respecting dictator. This time, I blame the people of Equatorial Guinea for just being too complacent to bad leadership. I mean, President Nguema has been sitting pretty in the helm of Equatorial Guinea power, doing whatever he wants. Meanwhile, the people of Equatorial Guinea are waiting on Jesus to tell them to move before they can push the old crony into oblivion in order to get their country back. That's why President Teodoro Nguema will be president until God comes calling. Emmerson Mnangagwa is the president of Zimbabwe since 2017 when Robert Mugabe was forcefully removed from office. And while the nation of Zimbabwe was saved by its military from sinking, it instead installed President Mnangagwa, an old guard, as Mugabe's replacement. President Mnangagwa is not exactly spring chicken. As a matter of fact, he's 83 years old. Well, call me a pessimist, but I don't think that Mnangagwa has the stamina to drive Zimbabwe to economic freedom for the simple fact that he's a senior citizen. At the age of 83, President Mnangagwa should settle for an advisory role in government and not to be president. He should also be grooming the next president of Zimbabwe because, let's face it, nothing lasts forever. I hope you all caught what I'm dropping here. Nangolo Mbumba is the president of Namibia since 2024. At the age of 84, President Mbumba looks like he needs a long break, a golden handshake, and a retirement package to ease him through his sunset years. The question is, what can President Mbumba do for the people of Namibia at his age? Let's be honest. Unless he's pointing us to the road to freedom and showing us how to get there, President Mbumba should just hang his spurs and call it a day. Jean-Lucien Savy de Tove is the president of Togo since 2025 and he's presently 87 years old. I think that the people of Togo do not care for their elderly because why would they allow a senior citizen to be their president? And why would President Savy de Tove want this kind of a stressful job at his age? Honestly, we need an age limit for the job position of a president here in Africa. There, I said it. And last but not least, we have Paul Biya, the president of Cameroon, who is currently the oldest president in the African continent. At the age of 93 years, yes, he is 93, President Biya should be forced into retirement for the sake of his well-being. I mean, people his age are not working at all, so why should he? At the age of 93, he can't run, he can't walk fast enough, he can't talk long enough, and he can't pay attention long enough to lead the people of Cameroon anywhere. And you have to wonder who is behind the shadows making decisions on his behalf, because at his age, he needs to be escorted to the bathroom. The government of Cameroon should retire President Biya today because clearly he is not fit to run for office due to his old age. So there you have it. Old may be gold, but old sometimes need to be replaced by new for progress and also for posterity. And our African leaders need to embrace the values of democracy and bow out with dignity when their time comes to step down from power. Even the Bible says there's a time for everything under the sun. There's a time to be born and there's a time to die. So also there's a time to keep and a time to release. All in all, political power may come and go, but what matters most is leaving a great legacy.